Usually, when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this inherent expectation of precision.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of like engineering. Like you
Perfect.
fall off a bike, your arm hurts, you go in for an x-ray, right?
Exactly.
And the doctor pulls up that scan, points to a jagged white line on the bone, and just says, there it is. That is the problem.
Right. It's totally binary. It is broken or it's not broken.
Exactly. It's
Mhm.
clean.
Hmm.
And frankly, it's comforting. We really like things to be visible. We like them to be neatly categorized.
Oh, absolutely.
But then, you step out of the orthopedics ward and into the world of human stress, of like our daily physiological burdens.
Yeah. And that's a whole different ballgame.
It really is. Suddenly that x-ray machine is entirely useless.
Mhm.
You're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky.
Completely invisible, mostly.
Right. So today, we are cracking open a massive stack of data from OXYZEN.ai. We've got their product matrices, learning hub tutorials, exhaustive blog comparisons, and literally thousands of user testimonials.
Yeah. It's a mountain of information.
It is,
Yeah.
because our mission for you today, listening to this deep dive, is to decode the invisible alarm system inside your body.
And we're focusing on a really highly specific, fascinating intersection here.
Yeah.
We are looking at where cutting-edge biometric technology, specifically the OXYZEN Smart Ring and its data ecosystem, where that meets deeply ancient wellness practices.
Like yoga breathing and pranayama.
Exactly. We are trying to understand how these highly advanced analytical tools actually track and optimize things like heart rate variability, your sleep architecture, and just, your daily routines.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before you even get to the technology,
Well,
we have to talk about the sheer scale of the problem.
we do.
Looking through the stress awareness data in these sources, the numbers are just terrifying.
They really are.
Work-related stress alone increases your risk of depression or anxiety by like 54%.
Yeah, it is a staggering figure. And honestly, it is a silent epidemic, but it's vital to understand that this extends far, far beyond mental health. The data shows personal stress actually raises your risk of circulatory disease by 72%.
Wow. Wait, 72%.
Yes. And it increases your risk of developing type 2 diabetes by 47%.
That is just wild.
We have, as a society, completely normalized living in a state of constant low-grade emergency.
Right, the body keeps the score. I've heard that phrase a million times. But what does it actually mean biologically?
That's the key question.
Like, if I am stressed about a deadline, how on earth does that translate into diabetes or a heart issue?
Well, it translates through actual structural chemical changes. When you perceive a threat, and to your primitive brain, a screaming boss is neurologically indistinguishable from a hungry predator, right?
Oh, wow. Yeah, the brain doesn't know the difference.
Exactly. Your HPA axis activates. That's the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis.
Okay.
So your hypothalamus sounds the alarm, the pituitary gland sends the chemical signal, and your adrenal glands just, flood your system with cortisol and adrenaline.
So my blood pressure goes up, my heart races.
Yes, but more insidiously, your body dumps glucose into your bloodstream.
To give my muscles energy to run away.
Precisely. But if you are just sitting at a desk, you don't burn that glucose.
Oh, right, because I'm just typing on a keyboard.
Exactly. So your pancreas has to pump out insulin to pack all that unused energy away. Do this day after day, year after year, and your cells actually become resistant to the insulin. That is exactly how a stressful email over a decade turns into type 2 diabetes.
Wow. Okay, so how do we measure this if we can't, see it on an x-ray?
Right.
That brings us to the ultimate metric we are looking at today, which is heart rate variability, or HRV.
Yes. It is the single most important biological language we have for quantifying this invisible stress.
But it's pretty frequently misunderstood, isn't it?
Highly misunderstood.
I'll admit I used to be totally confused by it.
Yeah.
So just to be incredibly clear for anyone listening, your heart rate is just a simple count, right?
Yeah.
Like 60 beats per minute? But your heart does not beat like a perfectly timed metronome.
Precisely. If your heart rate is 60 beats per minute, it is not beating exactly once every 1.0 seconds.
Okay.
The time interval between those beats is constantly shifting by like tiny fractions of a millisecond.
So it's microscopic changes.
Yeah. One gap might be 0.9 seconds, the next might be 1.1 seconds. That micro variation in the time between beats, that is your heart rate variability.
And the wildly counterintuitive part here is that we want high variability.
Yes, we do.
Because you would naturally assume a steady, perfectly rhythmic, machine-like heartbeat is the healthiest kind of heart.
It's a very common misconception. But a perfectly rhythmic heart is actually a rigid heart.
Huh.
High HRV indicates a flexible, highly resilient autonomic nervous system. Your nervous system is basically divided into two main branches constantly fighting for control.
Okay.
You have the sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight accelerator,
Right.
and you have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest brake.
So, wait, high variability actually means, oh, it's like a car suspension, right?
That's a great way to look at it.
If you have a really stiff, rigid suspension,
Yeah.
which would be a low HRV in this case, every single pothole, every tiny bump in the road is going to violently jar the entire car.
Exactly.
It feels terrible, and eventually the chassis is going to fracture.
Yes, yes. That is an excellent way to visualize it.
But if you have a highly responsive, flexible suspension, a high HRV, the wheels are constantly moving up and down to absorb the impact.
Right, they adapt.
So the cabin stays completely smooth, the chassis is protected, so a healthy heart needs that flexible suspension to absorb the bumps of daily stress.
Exactly. When your parasympathetic system, the brake, is active and dominant, your heart rate naturally slows down a tiny bit as you exhale, and it speeds up slightly as you inhale.
Oh, I see.
That creates high variability. It shows your body is incredibly responsive to its environment. It's relaxed.
Okay.
But when you are stressed, your sympathetic system, the accelerator, takes over entirely. It floors the gas pedal.
Mm.
Your heart rate becomes rigid, monotonous, and ready for immediate danger. The variability drops to almost nothing.
Because it's bracing for impact.
Precisely.
Mm.
And the stakes here are quite literally life and death.
Yeah, I saw this in the sources.
They point out a chilling statistic. A consistently low HRV is linked to a 40% increase in all-cause mortality.
40%.
Yeah. It is a fundamental predictor of how quickly you are wearing out your biological machinery.
But, I mean, if I'm driving down the road and you're listening to this in your car or on the train right now, you might feel totally fine.
Right.
You're sitting there, I can sit at my desk, sipping a coffee, feeling perfectly calm. How can my HRV be tanking if I consciously feel okay?
And this is the most dangerous aspect of chronic stress. Our subjective feelings are remarkably unreliable narrators of our biological reality.
Really?
Yeah. The physiological reality of stress doesn't require you to be sweating and hyperventilating. It can be a slow, silent drip.
Because of that HPA axis you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. You might be sitting there smiling, projecting an outward state of calm, but internally, your subconscious is registering a crowded inbox or, a subtle financial worry.
And the body reacts.
That triggers a cortisol spike. And the sources note that a significant cortisol surge can drop your HRV by up to 30% in mere minutes.
30% in minutes, while I'm just sitting there smiling.
Yes, because cortisol acts as a powerful vasoconstrictor. It tightens your blood vessels to increase blood pressure, forcing your heart to work harder and beat more rigidly to pump against that resistance.
Wow.
And this leads to a state called allostatic overload.
Allostatic overload. Break that down for us. What does that mean?
Well, allostasis is your body's incredibly complex system of maintaining stability through change. It's the process of the suspension absorbing the bumps.
Right.
But when the demands are sustained, when you are always on, always facing psychological potholes, those compensatory systems begin to exhaust themselves and fail.
They just wear out.
Exactly. You do not consciously feel the microscopic structural damage happening to your metabolic or cardiovascular systems until a major symptom finally appears. Outward calm absolutely does not guarantee internal relaxation.
Okay, so if my brain is basically lying to me about how stressed I am, I clearly cannot rely on my feelings.
No, you can't.
I need objective data. I need a dashboard that shows me the suspension in real time.
Which leads us to the hardware, the OXYZEN Smart Ring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because if you cannot feel the damage happening, you need a highly sensitive instrument to detect the minute changes in those milliseconds between heartbeats.
Now, when we talk about wearables, the immediate thought for most people is a smartwatch. You have the Apple Watch, the Galaxy Watch, Garmin, Fitbit.
Sure.
They are everywhere. But the sources draw a very deliberate conceptual line in the sand between watches and rings.
They do.
They use this analogy of the conductor versus the composer.
It is a profound paradigm shift in how we interact with our technology.
How so? Well, a smartwatch acts as the conductor of your daily life. It is highly active. It is heavily reliant on notifications.
Up there.
It manages your external world, your emails, your text messages, your calendar alerts. It sits very visibly on your wrist and constantly demands your attention.
It's totally bossy. It taps you and says, stand up, breathe, you have a meeting in 5 minutes, your friend just liked your photo.
Right. It is a command center.
Yeah.
But a smart ring is fundamentally different. It is the composer.
The composer.
Yeah. It is a passive, silent guardian. It has no screen. It does not vibrate to tell you about a text message.
Okay.
Its sole, singular purpose is managing your internal world. It sits quietly, observing the complex acoustics of your body, gathering the deep intelligence you need to compose a better baseline state of health.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. A smartwatch is vibrating on your wrist to remind you to be mindful.
Yes.
But that very vibration, that sudden interruption of your focus, actually causes a micro spike in your cortisol.
Oh, absolutely.
The device that is supposedly trying to measure your stress is actively causing the stress it is measuring.
It is the ultimate irony of the modern attention economy. Every single buzz, every screen illumination fragments your cognitive focus.
That's bad.
Very bad. Cognitive fragmentation is documented as a profound physiological stressor. By entirely removing the screen and the haptics, the ring creates a protected cognitive space. It observes without interfering.
But let's push back on that a little bit.
Right.
If I just turned off all the notifications on my smartwatch, wouldn't it be the same thing? Why does it have to be a ring? Why the finger over the wrist?
That comes down to pure biomechanics and anatomy.
Okay.
To measure HRV and these other vital metrics, both watches and rings use optical sensors, specifically an optical photoplethysmogram, or PPG.
Those are the little green or red LED lights you see flashing on the underside of the device, right?
Correct. They shine specific wavelengths of light into the skin and measure how that light scatters and reflects off your blood vessels as they expand and contract with each heartbeat.
Got it.
Now, consider the anatomy of your wrist. You have thick bones, dense muscle tissue, thick tendons. The primary arteries, like the radial artery, run relatively deep beneath all of that structure.
Most my wrist is never still. I mean, I'm typing on a keyboard, I'm talking with my hands, I'm carrying groceries.
Exactly. All of that gross motor movement creates massive motion artifact.
Motion artifact.
Yeah, it's essentially static noise in the data signal. The watch is constantly struggling to filter out the noise of your movement to find the actual heartbeat.
Oh, that makes sense.
But the finger, the anatomy is entirely different. The finger is packed with incredibly rich capillary beds, specifically the palmar digital arteries.
Okay.
They run right near the surface of the skin on the underside of your finger.
So the light doesn't have to penetrate as deeply.
Right. And furthermore, the base of your finger, relative to the wrist, experiences far less chaotic twisting motion, particularly while you sleep.
Yeah, my hands are pretty still when I'm sleeping.
Right, so the ring fits snugly, ensuring the sensors are always in optimal alignment with those superficial arteries. The signal-to-noise ratio is vastly, vastly improved.
And because the data is so much cleaner, it allows a company like OXYZEN to pack in features that you usually, only see in a hospital.
Exactly.
The sources dive into the medical-grade features of these rings, and it's frankly astonishing. They feature a 30-second single-lead ECG.
Yes.
And this isn't just some gimmick to look at a squiggly line on an app. The sources state this specific ECG capability is validated by the UK Biobank to predict heart attack risk up to 10 years in advance.
That's incredible.
Wait, pause. A ring on my finger can see a decade into my cardiovascular future. That sounds like science fiction. How is that medically possible without a massive ultrasound machine or like a deep blood panel?
I know it sounds like science fiction until you understand how predictive modeling works on massive data sets. The UK Biobank is one of the most respected, comprehensive, long-term cohort studies in the entire world. They track the genetics, lifestyle, and health outcomes of 500,000 people over decades.
Oh, wow. 500,000.
Yeah. So by validating their algorithms against this kind of massive data, OXYZEN isn't just looking at your simple heart rate. They're analyzing precisely. The ring is performing continuous longitudinal monitoring. It catches the whisper of a problem years before it becomes a scream.
And it is also running ultra-short HRV monitoring, specifically sending RMSSD alerts.
Yes.
Now, we need to define this because it sounds like alphabet soup. RMSSD. What exactly is the ring measuring here?
Well, RMSSD stands for the root mean square of successive differences.
Okay, that still sounds like a calculus final.
Yeah.
Explain it to me like I'm 5.
Yeah.
Why do we square the differences?
Fair enough. Imagine you were plotting the exact time between your heartbeats on a graph. The RMSSD formula looks at the millisecond difference between beat 1 and beat 2, then beat 2 and beat 3, and so on.
Okay, I'm with you.
It takes those differences and it squares them. In mathematics, when you square a number, you disproportionately amplify the larger numbers.
Oh, so it puts a magnifying glass on the biggest variation.
Not exactly. It acts as a highly sensitive volatility index for your heart. It specifically isolates the fast-acting parasympathetic nervous system, the brake pedal we talked about. When your RMSSD drops significantly below your personal historical baseline, the algorithm knows with high certainty that your parasympathetic tone has collapsed.
The brakes are gone.
Yes. And the app alerts you that your cardiac stress is surging, often hours before you consciously feel overwhelmed.
It's basically an early warning radar system.
Right.
And from a pure hardware perspective, the engineering is wild. The sources talk about a true wireless charging dock.
Yes.
There are 0 exposed charging ports on the ring itself.
Which is an absolute necessity for a biometric device designed for 247 wear. Think about what happens to exposed metal charging contacts on a watch.
They get gross.
They do. They trap sweat, acidic skin oils, dead skin cells, and moisture. They inevitably corrode and they irritate the skin. By making the ring completely sealed and utilizing true wireless induction charging, it achieves a 5 ATM waterproof rating.
So you can swim, take a hot shower, wash your hands a dozen times a day without ever, thinking about destroying the electronics.
Exactly.
And it also has active thermal heat dissipation pathways.
Yes, to ensure the ring doesn't overheat while on the charging dock. This protects both the delicate internal battery chemistry and ensures it's cool to the touch when you put it back on your finger.
And speaking of the battery, it lasts 7 to 10 days.
It's a game changer.
That is a massive pain point solves for me. With my old smartwatch, I always had to take it off to charge it at night, which is incredibly frustrating because nighttime is exactly when I need it most to track my sleep architecture.
Right, you lose half the data.
Exactly. But look, we promised to look at all the sources, and we have to remain perfectly impartial here. We have a source from Virtue that outlines the specific downsides and limitations of smart rings, and we really need to explore them.
Oh, definitely. It's crucial to weigh the compromises. Every form factor has its inherent limitations.
Right. So first, the lack of a screen is a double-edged sword. Yes, it protects your focus, but it also means you are entirely reliant on your smartphone to view any real-time data. If you are out on a long run and you want to instantly check your current heart rate zone or your pace to adjust your effort, you cannot do it by glancing at your hand. You have to physically pull out your phone, unlock it, and open the app.
Which breaks the flow state of an athlete in training. It is a genuine drawback for real-time endurance performance monitoring.
Second is durability. Rings are worn on your fingers, and our hands are how we interact with the physical world. We grab, we lift, we scrape.
Yes, they take a beating.
The Virtue article points out that while the metals are strong, matte finishes in particular can scratch and scuff if you are aggressively gripping steel barbells, doing heavy manual labor, or doing rock climbing.
Yes, and furthermore, they note that some specific metrics, most notably SpO2, which is blood oxygen saturation, can sometimes show inconsistencies compared to a medical-grade pulse oximeter clipped to your fingertip.
Oh, why is that?
This is highly dependent on the fit of the ring. If the ring rotates or if your finger swells and shrinks with temperature changes, the optical alignment shifts.
Oh, okay.
Which can introduce errors in the oxygen saturation reading.
And then there is the absolute biggest concern, which is privacy. You are generating highly sensitive biometric data.
Extremely sensitive.
The exact rhythms of your heart, exactly when you fall asleep and wake up, the precise moments your stress peaks during the day.
Yeah.
That is an absolute honeypot for data brokers.
It is the defining existential risk of the entire quantified self movement. The amount of deeply intimate behavioral and physiological intelligence these devices gather is literally unprecedented in human history.
The sources indicate OXYZEN's response to this is a strict architecture of end-to-end encryption.
Yes.
Processing the data locally on your phone whenever possible, and an explicit corporate policy of never selling user data to third parties.
Which is the gold standard for mitigation. However, the fundamental reality remains anytime your biometric data leaves your physical body and enters a digital ecosystem, a risk exists.
Right.
It is a calculated trade-off. The user has to consciously decide if the profound health insights are worth the digital footprint they are creating.
Totally. Finally, there's the financial landscape. The wearable market is incredibly crowded. The Virtue comparison looks deeply at the pricing models, specifically comparing this to the Oura Ring 4, which is obviously a major player.
Right.
The Oura starts around $349, but crucially, it requires a $5.99 monthly subscription just to see your own detailed long-term health data in the app.
Over the lifespan of the device, That fundamentally alters the value proposition.
It really does. If you wear it for 4 years through college or a demanding job, that subscription adds about $287 to the total cost. OXYZEN, however, is positioned completely differently in these sources. It operates on a subscription-free model.
Yes.
You buy the hardware, and you own your data and the full suite of analytics for life.
It transitions the wearable from being a perpetually rented service back into an owned, depreciating asset. For consumers fatigued by the subscription economy, that is a highly compelling financial structure.
Okay, so let's walk through the actual user experience. You've got the ring. It is sitting silently on your finger, capturing all of this incredibly flawless, high-fidelity HRV and ECG data.
Right.
You are sitting at your desk, you open the app, and you get a massive red alert. Your RMSSD has tanked. Your sympathetic nervous system is running wild. Your stress is through the roof.
Yes.
What do you actually do about it in that exact moment? This is the pivot point of our deep dive. We are shifting from passive biometric tracking into active biological intervention. And the primary tool we have is the breath.
This is where ancient physiological wisdom perfectly intersects with modern biofeedback.
Yeah.
But before we discuss the specific breathing protocols, we have to unpack a massive paradox that OXYZEN's data ecosystem has revealed. It is the paradox of what we classify as calming activities.
Oh, this absolutely blew my mind when I read it in the sources. The things we culturally associate with profound relaxation are actually triggering a stress response in our physiology.
Precisely. The aggregate ring data clearly shows that activities people self-report as highly relaxing, like taking a long, scorching hot bath, scrolling endlessly through social media on the couch, or even attending certain types of intense, loud, stress relief fitness classes.
Yeah.
These can relentlessly drive your HRV down.
Because it's a massive overstimulation. Let's break down the hot bath and social media scenario, because that sounds like a perfect Sunday night for millions of people.
Right.
You are submerged in hot water, which artificially raises your core body temperature. Your heart rate has to increase to pump blood to your skin to try and cool you down, so your heart is working harder mechanically.
Yes, it is a physical stressor.
And then, while your heart is working harder, you are scrolling through Instagram or TikTok. You're exposing your brain to hundreds of context-switching micronarratives every minute.
It's exhausting for the brain.
You are looking at everyone else's highly curated highlight reel. That triggers deep evolutionary comparison anxiety. Your primitive brain thinks you are falling behind the social pack.
Which historically meant starvation or exile.
Exactly. It is an existential threat.
Yeah.
So your cortisol spikes, your blood vessels constrict, and your HRV plummets. You think you are having a luxurious spa day, but your autonomic nervous system legitimately thinks you are under attack.
It is the ultimate proof of why subjective feeling is a totally inadequate metric for health.
Yeah.
To genuinely shift your autonomic tone, to force your body to abandon its sympathetic dominance, you cannot just passively sit there. You must mechanically and chemically engage the parasympathetic system.
And how do we do that?
The most direct, powerful, and universally accessible pathway to achieve that is through the respiratory system.
Which brings us to yoga, breathing, and pranayama.
Exactly. Breathing is a fascinating biological anomaly. It is one of the only vital functions that happens entirely automatically, regulated by the brainstem, but can also be completely controlled by conscious thought.
It's kind of like a manual override switch.
Yes. It is the bridge between the conscious and unconscious mind.
The sources specifically highlight several ancient techniques that have been clinically proven to dramatically alter HRV. They talk about diaphragmatic breathing, those deep, expanding belly breaths that physically stimulate the vagus nerve running through your abdomen.
Right.
They mention box breathing, inhale, hold, exhale, hold, which is used by elite military units to maintain heart rate control in combat. And they discuss alternate nostril breathing, which is said to balance the autonomic tone between the left and right hemispheres.
And all of these are highly effective. But the most prominent, heavily emphasized protocol mentioned in the OXYZEN Learn tutorials is something called resonant breathing.
Ah, yes. The 5-minute rule. Explain this resonant breathing to us, because when I first read it, it sounded almost too simple, too effortless to actually reverse allostatic overload.
It is elegant in its simplicity, but the physiology is profound. Resonant breathing is the practice of consciously breathing at a slow, highly rhythmic pace, typically right around 6 breaths per minute.
6 breaths a minute. So that's roughly a 5-second slow inhale and a 5-second slow exhale.
Exactly, and the tutorial emphasizes that you only need to sustain this pattern for 5 minutes.
Just 5 minutes. I find that hard to believe. If I've been stressed for 8 hours at work, 5 minutes of breathing is going to fix my nervous system.
It won't fix your boss or your inbox, but it will fundamentally reset your autonomic nervous system.
Wow.
Here's the mechanism of action. When you breathe at this specific resonance frequency of roughly 6 breaths per minute, you are synchronizing your respiratory rhythm perfectly with your cardiovascular rhythms.
You're aligning the gears.
Yes. It maximizes a phenomenon called respiratory sinus arrhythmia. When the rhythms synchronize, it generates a massive rolling wave of parasympathetic signaling through the vagus nerve.
Okay.
It floods the heart's pacemaker cells with acetylcholine, which is the neurotransmitter that slows the heart down. It physically, chemically forces the brakes onto the stress response. Your HRV skyrockets.
Okay, I have to push back here on the practical application. In a pristine laboratory setting or sitting cross-legged on a mountain, sure. But if you are in the middle of a chaotic, brutal workday, the inbox is overflowing, you are late for a meeting, your kids are texting you, you cannot exactly roll out a yoga mat, light some incense, and drop into a full pranayama session. Does this highly specific technique actually work in real time in the trenches of normal life?
That is the most critical question. A health intervention is useless if it cannot survive contact with reality.
Right.
But the thousands of user testimonials in our sources strongly suggest that it does work in the trenches. And the linchpin of its success is the biofeedback loop that the Ring provides.
I saw a review that perfectly captures this. A user named Phoebe D. She wrote this fascinating testimonial saying the health tracking ring made her realize exactly how hard her heart was secretly working during her endless back-to-back corporate Zoom meetings.
Wow.
She was just sitting perfectly still in an ergonomic chair, but her app showed her HRV was completely tanking and her heart rate was highly elevated. Her body thought she was fighting a war.
Because the cognitive demand and the social performance of those meetings were triggering a sustained sympathetic response.
Right. So, armed with that objective data, she didn't quit her job or buy a yoga studio. She intentionally started scheduling what she calls breath breaks.
Simple.
She just needs 5 minutes between the Zoom calls. She mutes her microphone, turns off her camera, and does exactly 5 minutes of that 5-second in, 5-second out resonant breathing.
And by intervening in those specific micro moments, she successfully prevents the allostatic overload from compounding and accumulating throughout the entire day.
She resets the baseline.
Exactly. She is venting the pressure from the boiler before it explodes. We also see this powerfully illustrated in the case of another user, Asha K. She noted in her testimonial that she had always struggled with meditation.
Like many of us.
Right. But pairing her breathwork with the Ring's real-time heart rate and HRV feedback made her practice significantly more rewarding and sustainable.
Because she could literally open her app and see a graph proving that her meditation was working. That visual, objective validation is so incredibly powerful for human motivation.
It really is.
It proves you aren't just sitting there wasting your time breathing into the void. You are actively, observably changing your biology.
It constructs a perfect positive reinforcement loop. You feel a subtle sense of stress. The Ring data confirms it is happening physiologically. You perform 5 minutes of targeted resonant breathing.
Yeah?
And then the Ring explicitly shows your HRV rebounding in real time. You have just taken conscious, active control of your autonomic nervous system.
Okay, so we've established that conscious breathing exercises are our tactical, close-quarters weapon for managing acute daytime stress.
Yeah.
But the ultimate macro-level recovery tool, the heavy artillery of human health, is sleep.
Absolutely.
We need to shift this deep dive into how the body utilizes sleep to repair the massive physiological debt we've accumulated during the day. Because stress and sleep are inextricably linked.
They exist in a relentless bidirectional relationship. It is a biological seesaw and very often a vicious cycle.
How so?
Well, extremely high daytime stress absolutely ruins your sleep architecture. Why? Because if your sympathetic nervous system is still highly active and dominant when your head hits the pillow, your brain physically cannot initiate the chemical cascades required to transition into the deeper restorative stages of sleep.
I'm too wired.
Exactly. You are sleeping with one eye open, neurologically speaking.
And then the cycle feeds on itself. Because you had shallow, poor quality sleep. You wake up the next morning with a deeply depleted, fragile nervous system.
Right.
Which means your stress response is wildly amplified for the entire next day. A minor annoyance, like spilling your coffee, feels like a catastrophic crisis because you have zero biological resilience.
Precisely. You have no shock absorbers left. This is exactly why OXYZEN's AI-powered sleep intelligence is designed the way it is. It doesn't just act like a stopwatch tracking how many hours you are lying horizontal in bed.
It goes deeper.
It tracks the intricate architecture of your sleep cycle.
I want to really dig into this architecture. If we look at a sleep graph from the app, what is the ring actually measuring and what is happening to my body in these different phases?
The algorithm divides your sleep into crucial, distinct phases, each serving an entirely different evolutionary and biological purpose.
Okay, start with the first one.
First, you enter light sleep. Now, culturally, we tend to dismiss light sleep as useless, just waiting for the deep stuff, but it is vital.
Really?
Yes, it is the transition phase where your brain produces sleep spindles, which are bursts of electrical activity critical for memory consolidation and filtering out sensory input.
It's like the brain's filing clerk organizing the immediate events of the day.
Yes. But then, as your heart rate and core temperature drop further, we descend into deep sleep, also known as slow wave sleep.
The absolute holy grail of recovery.
Without question, deep sleep is when the parasympathetic nervous system reigns supreme. This is when your pituitary gland releases pulses of human growth hormone.
Oh.
Your body undergoes massive physical recovery. It repairs the micro tears in your muscle tissue from exercise, it reinforces your immune system by producing T cells, and it engages in fundamental cellular repair.
So if you had a hard day, you need this.
Yes. If you are physically exhausted, if you have run a marathon or worked a 14-hour physical shift, deep sleep is what your biology desperately craves to rebuild the tissue.
And then finally, the cycle shifts into REM sleep rapid eye movement.
Yes. While deep sleep repairs the body, REM sleep repairs the mind.
Okay.
During REM, your brain is incredibly active, almost mirroring wakefulness, while your voluntary muscles are completely paralyzed to stop you from acting out your dreams.
Which is a good thing.
Yes, very good. This phase is crucial for intense emotional processing. The amygdala processes the emotional weight of yesterday's arguments or anxieties. It is also vital for procedural memory, literally learning how to perform new physical skills or complex tasks.
So if your stress prevents you from getting REM sleep, you wake up emotionally brittle, unable to handle interpersonal conflict. Now, while it's tracking all these stages, the ring is also running its optical sensors to track continuous blood oxygen, or SpO2, throughout the entire night. Why is monitoring blood oxygen so critical to understanding sleep quality?
Because sudden drops in your blood oxygen saturation during the night are massive red flags for severe breathing disturbances, most notably sleep apnea.
Oh.
When the soft tissues in your airway collapse during sleep, you literally stop breathing momentarily. Your blood oxygen plummets.
That sounds awful.
It is. Your brain registers that you are suffocating, it panics, fires off a massive spike of adrenaline, and kicks you violently out of deep restorative sleep into a lighter stage, or wakes you up entirely just so you can take a breath.
And the terrifying part is you might not even remember waking up.
Exactly. You might have zero conscious memory of it in the morning, but your autonomic nervous system was essentially being suffocated and shocked awake with adrenaline 30 times an hour. Your HRV the next day will be abysmal. The ring's highly sensitive SpO2 sensors are designed to constantly monitor for and flag these microscopic drops in oxygen.
This literally saves lives.
Yeah.
We saw a testimonial in the sources from a user named Darren S. He wrote that he felt fine, just a little tired, but the SpO2 tracking on his ring continuously showed his oxygen dipping below 90% at night.
Yeah, that's dangerously low.
Right, and that objective data pushed him to finally go see a sleep specialist. They did a study, and they caught a severe breathing issue very early. He got treatment, and it completely changed the trajectory of his health. That is life-changing data on your finger.
It is the power of making the invisible visible.
But I want to pivot slightly and talk about the concept of performance versus recovery, particularly for highly driven people. Because there is this pervasive, toxic hustle culture myth that you get better, faster, smarter, and stronger while you are working out or while you're grinding away at your desk at midnight.
That is a fundamental, dangerous misunderstanding of human physiology.
Tell me why.
You do not progress when you train. You do not get stronger while you are lifting weights. Training and intense cognitive work are entirely catabolic processes. They break your biological systems down, they cause microtrauma to tissues, and deplete neurotransmitters. You only progress, you only adapt and grow stronger when you recover from that stimulus.
Yes. The actual adaptation, the muscle growth, the memory formation happens during rest.
Yep.
And there is a truly fascinating scenario outlined in the sources from the OXYZEN Learn platform that illustrates the danger of ignoring this perfectly.
Oh, the weightlifter case study?
Yes, it is a case study about a weightlifter. This athlete goes to the gym,
Mm-hmm.
and they hit a massive deadlift personal record, a
Yeah.
PR. They lifted more physical weight off the floor than they ever have in their entire life. They feel on top of the world.
But then they check the app.
Exactly. They look at their app, and their morning HRV was sitting at 18 milliseconds. The sources state the critical recovery threshold is 20 milliseconds. So this athlete is operating well below the red line. How is it physically possible to perform at your absolute physiological peak when your HRV data is screaming that your body is broken?
It is a brilliant cautionary example of the human body's emergency reserve systems. Hitting a massive PR with rock bottom HRV means that the athlete's nervous system is running on pure, unadulterated sympathetic drive, adrenaline, and cortisol.
They are essentially tapping into the same system that lets a mother lift a car off a trapped child. It's hysterical strength.
Precisely. The massive neuromuscular drive of the fight or flight system is temporarily masking profound underlying systemic fatigue.
Wow.
The body is screaming for rest, but the athlete is using a massive dump of stress hormones to forcefully override the system. If they look at that PR and think, I feel invincible, my program is working, I'm going to push even harder tomorrow, they are walking blindly into a catastrophic trap.
A massive red flag for a severe injury.
They are risking torn ligaments, catastrophic joint failure, or plunging into severe overtraining syndrome, which can take months or years to recover from.
So what should they do?
The correct, data-driven, intelligent intervention in this exact scenario is to immediately deload. You step away from the heavy weights entirely.
Okay.
You utilize deep breathing exercises, you focus obsessively on sleep architecture, and you allow the parasympathetic system the time it needs to rebuild the damaged tissue. You do not push through that red line warning. You respect it.
And if we relate this back to you, the listener, right now, you might not be deadlifting 500 pounds. You might be a graduate student pulling back-to-back all-nighters to finish a thesis, or a busy professional balancing 3 massive projects, or a parent running on fumes.
Right.
The biological principle is exactly identically the same. Your brain is running on adrenaline, masking your fatigue. The ring's data helps you enforce necessary boundaries against your own relentless ambition.
It provides objective permission to rest. In a culture that glorifies exhaustion, data is a powerful shield.
I love the quote from username Sophie C in the testimonials. Her entire philosophy now is, if I see red, I go to bed earlier.
Simple and effective.
It's that beautifully simple. If the app shows her HRV is suppressed, she cancels the late-night Netflix binge and goes to sleep. Or look at Farah M., who used the app's longitudinal stress patterns to physically show her boss why she needed to negotiate better boundaries at work.
That's a great use case.
Because she could, in her words, literally see her calm days versus her chaotic days on a graph. The data becomes your personal advocate.
It entirely removes the guilt associated with resting. You aren't being lazy, you are engaging in highly strategic, data-driven recovery to ensure future performance.
Which brings us to a fascinating final area of exploration. We've talked deeply about formal breathwork and macro-level sleep architecture. But what about the micro choices? How do the tiny, seemingly insignificant everyday actions affect our physiological baseline?
Right.
Because the entire philosophy of OXYZEN seems to be about biohacking that baseline through daily routines.
This is where the continuous 247 monitoring truly shines. It lifts the veil and reveals the immediate, measurable physiological impact of our smallest micro-habits.
Let's start with the absolute simplest one, hydration.
Yes.
The OXYZEN Learn sources state a very specific statistic: drinking just 16 ounces of water, which is basically one standard bottle, boosts your HRV by roughly 6 milliseconds within just 10 minutes.
Yeah.
How on earth does plain water work that incredibly fast?
It all comes down to hemodynamics, the physics of blood flow.
Okay.
When you are even slightly imperceptibly dehydrated, your overall blood volume decreases. Because there is less liquid, your blood becomes slightly thicker, more viscous.
Oh, I see.
To pump that thicker, sludgier blood through thousands of miles of blood vessels and maintain adequate blood pressure to your brain, your heart physically has to work much harder.
It's straining.
Yes. This increased mechanical strain instantly triggers the sympathetic nervous system. It acts as a minor continuous stress state. By drinking just 16 ounces of water, it is rapidly absorbed into the bloodstream.
And that fixes it.
You restore the optimal blood volume, the blood thins out, the heart doesn't have to work nearly as hard, the sympathetic drive drops off, and the parasympathetic system brings your HRV up almost instantly.
It's literally like adding fresh oil to a struggling engine.
Yeah.
It instantly runs smoother. Okay, so that's a physical intervention.
Ah.
What about mental microhabits?
Right.
The sources compared a simple gratitude practice to formal meditation, and the data showed that for beginners, a simple 5-second gratitude practice, literally just taking a deep breath and thinking of one single thing you are deeply thankful for, can trigger a 4-millisecond HRV jump instantly.
This is a profound, observable demonstration of rapid neuroplasticity.
Okay, unpack that.
The brain and the heart are intimately electrically connected via the vagus nerve. For someone entirely new to mindfulness, attempting to sit still and formally meditate for 20 minutes can actually be a highly stressful experience.
Oh, totally.
They worry if they are doing it right, their mind constantly wanders, they get frustrated with themselves.
I have totally been there. You're sitting there thinking, am I enlightened yet? No. Okay, my foot is completely asleep and I need to check my email. It becomes a performance anxiety.
Exactly. The attempt at relaxation becomes a stressor. But gratitude is different. It is an immediate, universally accessible, highly positive emotional state.
Right.
Experiencing genuine gratitude for just 5 seconds instantly sends a powerful, unambiguous safety signal down through the vagus nerve directly to the heart's pacemaker cells, instantly elevating the HRV.
So it's a shortcut.
It is very often a much more effective, frictionless entry point for beginners than attempting weeks of formal meditation training.
And the biofeedback on the app proves to them instantly that it works, so they keep doing it.
What about environmental stressors like travel? Jet lag is the ultimate biological disruptor.
Oh, it's brutal.
The data in the sources says traveling across multiple time zones drops your HRV for up to 7 entire days. Your biological resilience is just shot for a week, but there is a specific protocol mentioned to fix it. The jet lag protocol. It brilliantly leverages our circadian biology to force an adaptation. If you arrive in a new time zone, the absolute most effective intervention is not a nap, but 1 hour of bright, natural light exposure combined with a 20-minute brisk walk.
Why does that specific combination work so well to fix HRV?
Because light is the primary Zeitgeber, a German term meaning time giver, for your brain's central biological clock, the suprachiasmatic nucleus.
Wow, okay.
Bright sunlight entering your eyes aggressively suppresses the production of melatonin, forcefully signaling to your brain that it is daytime in your new location.
And the walk.
The physical movement of the 20-minute walk raises your core body temperature, which provides a powerful secondary waking signal. Together, the light and the temperature physically forcefully realign your internal biological clock with the local external environment.
That's amazing.
It dramatically accelerates the recovery of your autonomic nervous system and your HRV.
Finally, let's talk about the big one, the holy grail of the wellness space, anti-aging. The biohacker perspective. We hear so much in pop culture and podcasts about testosterone replacement, hormone therapy, stem cells, all these wildly expensive, invasive interventions to try and stay young. But the sources suggest we might be obsessing over the wrong primary metric entirely.
Hormones absolutely matter, but they are just one piece of a vastly complex puzzle.
Right.
From a functional standpoint, the ultimate marker of physiological youth is not just your hormone panel, it is resilience.
Resilience.
How quickly can your body bounce back from an insult, whether that is a virus, a hard workout, or a stressful day? And HRV is the ultimate, universally recognized metric of that systemic resilience.
And here is the sobering statistic from Danaway.
Yeah.
HRV naturally peaks around age 20 and then begins a gradual, relentless, lifelong decline. Our autonomic nervous system literally stiffens as we age. The suspension gets rusty.
Yes. The parasympathetic tone weakens, and the sympathetic system becomes hyperreactive. This autonomic stiffening is heavily correlated with the diseases of aging cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, cognitive decline.
But it's not a death sentence, right?
No, absolutely not.
The sources point out that by intensely using HRV-based training, using the ring to know exactly when to push your physical limits and exactly when to rest, and by engaging in daily vagal toning through resonant breathwork and optimal hydration, you can radically alter that trajectory.
You really can.
You can slow that age-related decline. Elite athletes in their late 30s and 40s who strictly train by monitoring their HRV can maintain the physiological resilience, the autonomic flexibility of a 20-something.
You can actively maintain a youthful, highly flexible nervous system on a cellular level, delaying the onset of allostatic overload by decades.
You can literally keep the suspension flexible. So if
Right.
we pull all of this together, synthesize everything we have covered today, the biggest takeaway for me is that wellness is not about massive, overwhelming lifestyle overhauls.
No, it's not.
You do not have to quit your stressful corporate job and move to a remote ashram to find health. It is about using an objective tool, like the Smart Ring, to create an inescapable biofeedback loop.
Right.
It proves to you, empirically on your own smartphone screen, that drinking a single glass of water, taking 5 seconds to feel grateful, or doing 5 minutes of alternate nostril breathing between your Zoom calls actually tangibly changes your biology in real time.
It entirely removes the guesswork. It makes the invisible damage visible, and it validates the power of your microhabits.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today, from the silent corrosive damage of cortisol on the HPA axis to the rich capillary beds in your finger that make the technology possible.
We really have.
We've explored how resonant breathing syncs your heart and lungs, and how the deep architecture of your sleep rebuilds your cellular structure. I want to wrap this up by reminding you, listening right now, of the incredible power you hold over your own biology. We are not just passive victims at the mercy of modern stress. We do not have to just blindly accept burnout, exhaustion, and disease as normal conditions of modern life. By tracking these invisible biological signals, your HRV, your SpO2, your sleep architecture with sophisticated tools like the OXYZEN Ring, and by actively engaging your biology through pranayama, hydration, and deeply strategic rest, you become the active, conscious composer of your own health.
You regain absolute autonomy over your autonomic nervous system.
So what does this all mean? It means you have the power to change your physiology from the inside out, one single breath at a time.
But if we look just over the horizon at where this technology is rapidly heading, this raises a deeply important, perhaps slightly unsettling question to leave you with.
Oh, I'm ready.
As these smart rings get increasingly sophisticated, as their predictive AI gets better at recognizing our stress patterns hours before we even consciously feel the anxiety, are we heading toward a world where our wearables automatically communicate with our external environments?
So what do you mean?
Imagine a scenario where your ring detects your HRV plummeting due to an impending deadline, and instantly, without your input, it dims your harsh office lights, changes your smart speaker to play a calming acoustic frequency,
Oh,
or even temporarily locks you out of your email inbox entirely, physically forcing you into a guided 5-minute pranayama breathing session, bypassing your conscious choice entirely, overriding your ambition for the sake of your own cardiovascular survival.
wow. The invisible alarm system literally takes over the smart house to save you from yourself. That is an incredibly wild, provocative thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the complex architecture of your well-being. Before you jump into whatever stressful task is next in your day, take a slow, deep, resonant breath. 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. Take care of yourselves.